What's up, guys and girls? My name is Gary Blackwood, also known as GazzyB123, and welcome to episode 9 of the GazzyB Poker Vlog. I'm going to get straight into the action today. As always, we're playing 5-10 in the... This? Oh, well, since you ask. I was playing in the Venetian. Played a $600 deep stack the other day. It was a one-day event, 75k guaranteed, and ran very, very well. Didn't play brilliantly in hindsight, looking back at a couple of spots, but managed to win the entire tournament for 18.3k. We did a deal three-handed, and I took home the lion's share of the prize pool, $18,300. I ran it extremely well, as mentioned. It was a really fun day. Everyone that played was a legend. Lots of new friends, and playing with cowboys and stuff like that. It was just such a great day. I really enjoyed it, and I didn't have to bribe anyone to take home the mini trophy here. Most of you will know about the trophy that I had to bribe to keep at the win, but if you don't know, it's another story for another day. In all seriousness, really fun day. Really happy to get a nice score early in the summer. And yeah, hopefully more to come. So back to today's session. As mentioned, we're playing 5-10 in the Bellagio. This first hand with pocket deuces is a bit of a doozy, so stick around for that. Hopefully you guys enjoy the show. On to our first hand of the day, and it was also quite literally our first hand of the day. We've been dealt pocket deuces in the cutoff. We make it $30 to go. It falls round to the big blind. He's a very reggy looking fella. He makes it $140, and I decide that given 1, we're paying no rake, 2, we're 150 bigs effective, and 3, it's the first hand of the day. I want to see a flop. I go ahead and make the call. We don't flop our set, but we do flop a 2-high backdoor flush draw, so when my opponent bets half pot, I decide to make the call with the devious intention of bluffing flush completing turns. The turn does not complete the flush, however it is somehow a deuce. We've somehow turned a set on a very wet board. There's now straight draws and 2 flush draws out there. My opponent bets $400. He's only got about $600 behind, so I decide that I want to jam this hand with some combo draws like King Jack of Spades and Jack 10 of Hearts and all those sort of great draws that we've got. It's never a good sign when your opponent doesn't snap call. He should be snap calling all his Queen X, his Kings, his Aces. He thinks for about 20 seconds or so. Unfortunately, he makes the fold, but what an absolute dream turn in our first hand of the day. Next up, I'm in the straddle with King Jack offsuit. It's folded round to the big blind, who's another reggy looking fella. He makes it $60 to go. Pretty easy peel for us. We go ahead and make the call. Not the best flop in the world, but certainly not the worst flop. So when my opponent checks, we decide to check this one back. On the turn, my opponent bets small. He can definitely have a weak ace here, but he can also have a hand like 9-high or 8-high, just trying to steal the pot. So it's a very easy call for us. On the river, we make 2 pair, but it does complete a lot of draws. My opponent bets $100, and after thinking for a few seconds, I decide to raise it to $360. My opponent makes a pretty quick call, and he shows his river to straight. In game, I thought my raise was completely fine, but after thinking about it after the hand, my opponent has to be betting a lot of his ace-x hands and then calling a raise with them to make this profitable, and I'm not sure he does that. I'm not even sure he bets a lot of his ace-x hands on this river, so I think in hindsight, this raise is just a little on the thin side. In this next hand, we've got King Jack of Diamonds in the small blind. We make it $40 to go. The big blind is a watcher of the vlog, very friendly guy, another reggy looking fella. He makes it $130, and I decide to make the call. We flop backdoor everything without actually flopping a pair, and my opponent bets $90. I thought about raising for a few seconds, but then I thought, King 8, Queen 9, all those sort of gut shot hands with backdoor flush draws make for better raises here, but I really don't want to fold versus a 1/3 C bet, so I decide to float here. I make the call. The turn pairs the top card, I check, and my opponent quickly checks back. The river is an ace, and I decide that my betting range here is going to be very polarized, so I overbet to $600. I'm very confident I would be consistent with my sizing here if I flopped a set and turned a boat, or if I've turned trips, or if I flopped a straight. If I've got a really strong hand, this is the size that I would choose. My opponent thinks for a long time before eventually releasing his cards. Phew. A few orbits later, MP limps, and I raise to $50 in the small blind. The same villain from the last hand makes it $150 to go in the big blind, and I make the call. Traditionally, ace queen off is supposed to be used as a 4-bet bluff in these blind versus blind spots, but this isn't a traditional blind versus blind spot. So if I open the small blind normally, the big blind is supposed to 3-bet hands like King 8 offsuit and 10 deuce suited, and all those sort of polarizing hands, but given there's been a limp, my opening range changes and is much tighter, and as a result, the big blind's 3-bet range is much tighter, so we don't want a 4-bet bluff with a hand like ace queen offsuit. It's going to play much better as a call in these slightly tighter ranges. We go heads up to a pretty sweet flop for us. I check call versus $110. The turn brings in a ton of draws and my opponent bets 500 bucks, which is basically a pot-sized bet. It's already starting to get a little gross. If I didn't have the ace of diamonds here, I'd probably just go ahead and shove, but given I do, my opponent can't have hands like ace king of diamonds, ace jack of diamonds, so we're shoving into a less draw heavy range, which means my opponent's range is a little stronger. I decide to just call. Without the ace of diamonds, I'd probably just go ahead and shove here. The river is a complete brick and my opponent shoves for about $700. I absolutely snap here, not because I think it's a super fist pump call gonna win the money all the time, but because I know I'm not allowed to fold. It's a bit of a size snap spot. My opponent turns over the exact same hand. A whole lot of stress over nothing. We chop this one up. Next hand, we've got ace jack of clubs on the button. The hijack is open and we've 3-bet to $100. I've actually posted this hand on social media recently. You might have already seen it, so let's whiz through it together. Like I say, I 3-bet pre-flop, my opponent calls. We bet 1/3 on jack 10-10 rainbow, really standard stuff. My opponent makes the call. On the 4 of hearts turn, I decide that my hand is strong enough to bet for value, maybe checking a hand like queen jack or king jack, but ace jack we definitely want to bet, so I bet $270. My opponent calls again. River's a really weird spot. We improve, but I thought about it for a while in game and I decided it's really hard to get called by worse in this spot. I don't expect any ace queen or ace king. The only hand that I can really think of that might call here is ace queen of hearts. I feel like my opponent's queen jack, king jack, pocket queens type hands are just gonna go ahead and fold, so I decide to check back, and thank God we're a nit because my opponent turns over queen 10 of spades and it would have for sure cost us a stack if we'd bet the river. I am absolutely certain that everyone watching this will be able to relate to what's about to happen. I decide before the turn is dealt that I'm done with the hand, I'm not putting another dollar in the pot, and I find myself bluffing the river. So there's been a limp to $20 because the straddle's on. I make it 100 to go in the small blind. It folds back round to the limper, he makes a call and we're heads up to the flop. The flop is double Broadway, we've got a backdoor flush draw, so I decide to bet here and try and steal the pot, make my opponent fold his ace highs or his low pocket pairs, all those sort of hands. My opponent calls, the turn is an 8 and I decide I'm done, I'm not putting another dollar in the pot, and I check. My opponent checks back and the river is a 9, very bluffable river because there's now a 4-liner to a straight on board, and I decide that I may as well bluff this. I can't win at showdown. I can make my opponent fold some 2-pair hands and some 1-pair hands, so I bet $320. I think this is the same size I'd choose if I did have a queen. My opponent doesn't take long before calling. He's got queen 10 of diamonds, which is basically what I was trying to represent.
It's like the 10th time I've had ace queen.
Ladies and gents, I propose that we start a movement right here, right now, and I'm being deadly serious. I propose that if we win a hand pre-flop with ace king, not, you know, if we've 5-bet jammed or something, but if we've 3-bet pre and someone folds, let's go ahead and turn over our ace king. As you're about to hear, I turn over my ace king and there are 2-3 fun players at the table and they say, oh, ace king, nice, what you got? Nice hand, nice. Fun players play the game of poker for the thrill of the game. They love seeing full houses and quads and top boats and straight flushes and stuff like that. So just turn over your ace king, make it a little more exciting for these people. I don't think you give away any free information by showing that you've 3-bet ace king. So let's turn over our ace king if we win a hand pre-flop.
Just ace king. Nice. Thank you.
This next hand is 96% fun and 4% embarrassing. I open 8-7 of diamonds in MP. The button calls. Small blind's a newer player to the game. He makes $160 to go. Given we're in position versus the squeezer and we're 2k effective, I go ahead and make the call. The button gets out of the way and we go heads up to the flop. We flop a gut shot with a backdoor flush draw. My opponent bets 1/3. It's a pretty easy call for us in position. The turn pairs the second card and my opponent checks. He's going to check his queen X and his overpairs sometimes, but he's got a lot of ace high and king high hands in his range that I can make fold whilst in position. So I decide to bet 1/3 pot. This is really consistent with the value parts of my range. If I had a hand like 9-8 suited or a flop set that's now turned boat or ace queen, I would bet 1/3 with all these hands. My opponent calls very quickly and I decide that I'm not going to bluff the river if we brick, which we do. My opponent checks to me and I decide he's not going to fold. I may as well just check this one back, save myself a few $100. It's never good to check down 7 high in position, but I decide my opponent's just not going to fold. So exploitably, I'm not going to have any bluffs here. My opponent checks, I check back. My opponent shakes his head and turns over jack 10 suited. He's got jack high and I have to suffer the indignation of slowly sliding my cards into the muck. The whole table didn't know where to look. It's been a very long day, a really long grind, lots of gritty small pots, not a lot of action, but the whole table is very fun at the same time, which kind of makes up for the lack of action. Everyone's very friendly, very chatty. It's been a really nice day so far. As ever with live poker, I spent a lot of time not playing hands, riffling chips, being patient, chatting to people on my phone, all that sort of stuff. Patience is something I used to really struggle with a lot in live poker, but thankfully it's something I've overcome. and I maintain my discipline now in these boring stretches. After a delay of no hands, I look down at ace-10 offsuit in the big blind. There's been an open and 4 calls. I call as well, and we are 6 ways to the flop. It's king, king, 8 rainbow, and everyone checks. The turn is a brick, and the first pre-flop caller stabs for $60. The button calls as well, and I decide to raise here to 210. I think the MP player can have some king X here, but it's very unlikely, and the button just never has a strong hand given he's checked back on the flop 6 ways. So I decide to attack 2 cap ranges here and try and steal the pot. It gets through very quickly this time, and I never normally make these low equity bluffs multi-way, but both players are really capped here, and it makes sense to be aggressive in this spot, so I'm wondering if this is something I should start doing more often. At this point of the day, we're still stuck about $700-800. There's only 30 minutes left in our session before we leave for dinner. We look down at Jack 10 of diamonds in the small blind. MP opens. The cutoff's a new player to the game. He's munching on a slice of pizza. He makes the call, and I put in the squeeze to $150. Only Mr. Pizza Man calls. We go heads up to the flop. We flop an inside straight draw, and we can put a lot of pressure on our opponent's ace highs, his 1 pair hands, his low pocket pairs, those types of hands. So I see bet here for $120. My opponent instantly makes it 300 to go. His chips are literally in the pot before mine. Really not loving life here, but we only have to call another 180 to win a potentially big pot given how strong my opponent should be here with his snap raise. So I make the call. The turn completes the flush, and I check to my opponent, who checks back just as quickly as he raised the flop bet. I think he will almost never have a flush here given the action, but he can still definitely have some strong hands that are just pot controlling given the flush is completed. The river is an unbelievable 9-ball corner pocket of spades. I bet 7 black chips, almost enough to put my opponent all in. I thought I had put enough out there to put them all in, but not quite. My opponent calls very quickly. As I'm turning over my straight, he turns over his ace queen, and without going into detail, let's just say he was not a happy man. 1 orbit later, and the same opponent from the last hand opens to $40. I have king queen of clubs in the small blind and raise to 150. My opponent makes a very quick call. It's a flop I would normally see bet this hand on with so often, but I decide that my opponent is going to make either a fuck you call or a fuck you raise a lot of the time, so I decide to check. My opponent checks back. The turn is a king, and I really should be betting this hand always, but I decide for whatever reason to check again. My opponent takes this opportunity to absolutely bomb the turn for $300. We're not going anywhere. We take a moment and make the call. The river is an offsuit 3. I check again, and my opponent instantly checks back and turns over his ace king. Really glad he didn't bet the river, because I would have for sure paid him off. But after this hand, I felt like I was getting a bit tired, a bit sloppy, not playing my best, so I racked up my chips. I ended the session and headed out for dinner. I lost a whopping $33 for the day. Very tough grind, but a very fun day overall. Lots of nice players at the table, lots of good chat, and lots of new friends and lots of new subs for the vlog. If anyone that was at that table is watching, it was really nice to meet you, really nice to play with you, and I hope you have a great summer. That's all from me for this week, guys. Really hope you enjoyed the show. Go ahead and click that like and sub button. I've got lots of great stuff coming up, and I don't want you guys to miss out. So click that sub button, and you'll be the first to see it when it comes out. Until next time, take it easy.